That's what's going to happen, and it's coming. It's a slow, steady process, but eventually there's going to be a CFTC chair who says, you know what, Bitcoin is a financial asset and we're going to treat it as such. And when that happens, you're going to see Bitcoin move in a very, very strong, positive direction. So that's why I'm a fan of Bitcoin. It's going to go much higher. It always bounces around like any other financial asset, but ultimately over the next 5 years, as it gets invited into this party, up we go.
Oh, fuck! Oh, shit! Oh,
What's going on, guys? K-Dub here with another episode of Crypto Zombie. Welcome back to the channel. Hope you're having a great day today. Now, Bitcoin, although arguably the sentiment is awkwardly negative right now for some reason, which we'll get into in a bit, if we have a look at the chart right here, Bitcoin is literally still just consolidating in the same area where we've been bouncing around. We come down to around 90,000, right? It always gets bought up, massive wick buying it up right here, and then we find resistance around the, sort of all-time high between 106 and 107. So ultimately, Bitcoin is really still just consolidating, and I know a lot of people are super impatient about this strategic Bitcoin reserve. We've said this again, the same thing with the Bitcoin ETFs. These things don't happen overnight, and even when they do happen, there still is a lot more to come. But, if you notice, I haven't really been over on X tweeting as much recently. And, here's some of the sentiment just to point this out. Like Maine says, this has been one of the worst iterations of crypto Twitter since I've been around. It seems to get worse every cycle. There are still some fantastic OG accounts and new accounts that are fantastic, but the amount of miserable, I'm not going to say the word, on here grows exponentially by the day. So many people bitching, moaning, complaining, hating on others. Imagine if some of you pointed that energy inward, how much more you could accomplished. And here's another example from Trader Black. For the first time in 2 years, I'm seeing the timeline actually giving up on their bags and just exiting. Feels weird actually seeing capitulation and people even posting about it. Haven't seen this since the FTX crash. And the strangest thing about the sentiment right now is maybe this is because I am basically all Bitcoin. Bitcoin's only down 10% from the all-time high. We're still right around $100,000. I mean, if you had asked somebody if they thought Bitcoin was going to hit $100,000 last year, they would have said, no way, absolutely not, never going to happen. Meanwhile, we got one of the largest surprises of Bitcoin hitting 100,000. We also have potential talks about strategic Bitcoin reserves. We have it, it was basically a talking point for the presidential election, and yet people are miserable because we don't have a strategic Bitcoin reserve on day one. I mean, it just to me seems a little bit crazy. And what it's telling me is that there are a lot of potentially new people that are in the space. They're unaware of how these cycles work, and they're probably over allocated into a lot of these, especially these meme coins, man. It's just insane the amount of gambling that's been going on. And, not to just point it out, but had the average individual just dollar cost averaged into Bitcoin over the last 2 years, rather than take, the money from your paycheck, gamble on a meme coin, lose 99%, and then complain that crypto's a scam, it's just the weirdest thing. I don't think I've ever seen sentiment this low while Bitcoin is putting in new highs. It's just really, really madness. And I do have to say, I hope that everyone out there watching has taken the opportunity to, attempt to get as much Bitcoin as possible and realize that Bitcoin continues to put in new all-time highs, whereas, and I'm not trashing or on anything, but Ethereum still hasn't put in a new high. XRP came pretty close, but still technically didn't put in a new all-time high. And a lot of these altcoins are down, 40, 60% from the top. Bitcoin's chilling around 10%. So I just had to get that out of the way before we get into the video. It's not as bad as everyone thinks it is. I just think that a lot of people are allocated into a lot of coins that they don't believe in because they're arguably just gambling, or they're trying to, get a quick flip or something like that, and they're really missing out on the bigger picture. So, that's obviously why this channel has been primarily Bitcoin focused, but there's a lot of stuff I want to go over today anyway. That was like a rant usually I'd put at the end of the video, but I had to put it in the beginning of the video. I do hope you're all doing well, though, and I do hope that you are all, attempting to accumulate as much Bitcoin as possible. Again, I've heard it time and time again. When it was 20,000, people said it was too high. I can't buy, right? Then it went to 60,000. It's too high. Then 100. What's going to happen when Bitcoin's 1 million? Then they're going to say, man, I wish I bought at 100, right? And, again, 1 million, that can never happen. That's what they said about 100. You know, that's what they said about 20. So, you know, you got to just look at it and take it for what it is. So don't forget, guys, we do have a lot of bonuses right now. If you're looking to trade, you know, if you want to use leverage, that's fine. I do recommend low leverage, 2 to 3x. You know, use it for actually what it's meant to be used for, not gambling. Blowfin, massive bonuses if you use the link below exclusively. And also for Femex, you're not going to be able to find this too many places, but obviously we've worked with Femex for a very long time, and they are offering a $30,000 bonus. They're totally non-KYC, $50,000 withdrawal a day, which I think is a lot of money for the average person. So yeah, definitely check out Femex and Blowfin if you guys are interested. So let me just start here. So Trump is going to launch a Bitcoin Plus ETF. Safe to say the first ever president that an ETF has been issued under. Now, this is Eric Belchunas that came out with this post, and he is like an ETF expert. That's basically his thing. It's what he focuses on. Now, obviously, this is for, you know, truth.fi, but keep in mind, you know, it's Trump's company. So it's not officially the White House, right? But it is Trump's company. So again, baby steps, guys. We will get there. These things take time, right? So hopping on over to just some things I wanted to point out. Again, guys, we had 34,466 Bitcoin withdrawn from exchanges in just one day. So if you want to put that into perspective, that's almost 3 months of the mine supply of Bitcoin. Pretty much, right? Because we know every 10 minutes we get so many Bitcoin coming out. So we had about 3 months of Bitcoin mining wiped off of exchanges in 24 hours. And remember, I showed you that hypothetical in my previous video that at that rate, okay, of course this will never happen, but I'm just saying hypotheticals here. If it was to continue and no one was to ever put it back on the exchanges, there would be no more Bitcoin on the exchanges as of August of 2027. Now, is that going to happen? Probably not. But just to put it into perspective, if you do start having countries and sovereign wealth funds and, you know, all these companies looking to put it on the balance sheet, making strategic reserves, well, it could accelerate that and it could become a possibility, right? So that's something you have to consider. Also, yesterday's spot Bitcoin ETF saw 66.4 million inflow, and yet people are freaking out. Why is price not going up? What's going on? Guys, it's literally like right now, we're in that accumulation period, right? Some people say it's distribution. I disagree. I think it is accumulation, right? What's happening is you're having the price suppressed and they're buying back up at the levels. And who's selling? Well, we saw in the chart from the other day that the short-term holders are selling and the whales are buying, right? So again, if you're selling your Bitcoin, I know I say this all the time, but the question is, who are you selling your Bitcoin to? And before we get into all the political, you know, presidential strategic reserve stuff, I wanted to point something simple. This is stuff that we used to talk about a lot on the channel. Do you see this chart right here? The Federal Reserve's reverse repo facility is plummeting, okay? Quantitative easing and money printing will start aggressively when this drains, right? Possibly down to zero, who knows? Will it go that low? I don't know. But what I do know is that at some point, you're going to see the Fed reverse their tone, and money printing is inevitable. Now, I usually don't hop into the charts this early, but the DXY has been having a pretty successful run up to the upside right here, right? And you could see that we did in fact break this. Now this is a stereotypical sort of descending broadening wedge pattern. So it was kind of not a surprise that we had this breakout, but now we're starting to have this area where we're having some resistance right around the 110 area. Now, if this does start to have a reversal and we start seeing the DXY fall, traditionally speaking, usually this is good for risk on assets, right? And like Bitcoin Teddy pointed out, they will always find a way to print more money. You know, you could see all these things in here: Korean War, Cuban Missile Crisis, Nixon resigns, 18% mortgage rates, Soviet Union collapse, Y2K, Iraq, Brexit, COVID. And what happens? Every time we have a little dip, boom, we print the money. Boom, we print the money, right? This is not going to end anytime soon. And regardless of the politics, the strategic Bitcoin reserves and all that, people are waking up to the fact that their money is being eroded, right? And even on top of the taxes, you're literally being hidden taxed by inflation and money printing, which is again what makes Bitcoin such a lucrative, you know, asset. Very, very appealing, especially to people that want to preserve, right? So you have wealth generation, but then what about your wealth? You can make money, but if you take that money and store it under a mattress, if you have $100 under your mattress today, you take that money out in 10 years, what are you going to be able to buy with it, right? Look at there was a chart with Bitcoin houses priced in Bitcoin, right? Today, the average home is like 5 Bitcoin. Like 5 years ago, the average home was like 100 Bitcoin or something like that, right? So that's just getting that out of the way. So getting into the, I guess, more political aspect, even though I'm not a political person, but, you may have seen that, Trump is talking about this potential sovereign wealth fund for the U.S. Now, if you see this guy right here, okay, this is Howard Lutnick, okay? And he is the one that is supposed to be in charge, essentially, of this sovereign wealth fund. Now, who exactly is this guy? Well, I think rather than me explain it, I just want to show you a video clip of him speaking about Bitcoin.
I guess the easiest way to get a clear view of where Bitcoin is going over the next 5 years is take a look at the last 5. Right? The last 5, Bitcoin has been an outsider in the finance business, becoming closer and closer and closer. Right now, there's an ETF just starting to go a little bit mainstream, maybe a toe in the water of mainstream, but banks still can't clear it. Banks still can't transact in it. Banks still can't custodian it. Banks still won't transact in it, and they won't finance it yet. I think people misunderstand traditional financial service companies. They want to transact in Bitcoin. They want new asset classes to transact in. That's just a good thing, but they need the regulator to say it's okay. Right now, today, right? If a bank were to hold your Bitcoin, they would have to set aside their own money equal to that amount in sort of like in a jail. I mean, you'd say, well, that's crazy. The answer is, that's why they don't hold it. But if you let them hold it, if the regulatory environment was good, you will see all the traditional financial service companies, the big banks, the big brokerage companies, they're all going to go headfirst into Bitcoin pond. That's what's going to happen, and it's coming. It's a slow, steady process, but eventually there's going to be a CFTC chair who says, you know what, Bitcoin is a financial asset and we're going to treat it as such. And when that happens, you're going to see Bitcoin move in a very, very strong positive direction. So that's why I'm a fan of Bitcoin. It's going to go much higher. It always bounces around like any other financial asset, but ultimately over the next 5 years, as it gets invited into this party, up we go.
And yet people still are somehow bearish. I mean, this is the dude that is supposed to be in charge of the sovereign wealth fund, and people are concerned about Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies because we haven't put this into effect on the 3rd week. Like, to me, it's like, the problem is like when you're in crypto, you're used to like, you're in these meme coin casinos and things are pumping and things are moving. And, they always joke and say like, a day in crypto is like a year, right? Well, in the real world, that's not the case. In the real world, things take time, right? But, he was over on Anthony Pompliano, and, here's just another example of him speaking about Bitcoin, and then, again, people are bearish.
But like, how do you think about either you or Cantor?
I don't have a big enough percentage. I probably have, I can't say because then people can figure out the money and how much I have. I would say I have hundreds of millions of dollars.
Okay.
Hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars exposure to Bitcoin. And it will be billions.
I was going to say, so next year when you come back and we'll do this again and you'll be a Bitcoin billionaire and
yeah, but you remember that model I told you. So if every time Bitcoin dips, I'm going to be the buyer. Right?
Trust me, I know why you're doing the lending.
It's all coming. You figured it out.
Listen, you don't have to explain that one around here.
So I got the 50% Bitcoin, I got the Bitcoin lending, but basically what you're going to see is Cantor Fitzgerald is going to be the sponsor of Bitcoin into traditional finance.
Mm-hmm.
And so we will be the leader of it. And I'll pull out this podcast in years to come and say, see, I told you, because no one's going to remember.
Of course.
Right. But all the banks, after we do it and show people how to do it right, they'll all copy.
Mm-hmm.
And so the asset of Bitcoin will just, as it becomes more accepted, it will become more valuable. And the whole Bitcoin nation should just call it a commodity, never a currency.
Mm-hmm.
Just call it a commodity. Because if it's a currency, you're attacking the politicians of the country,
mm-hmm.
right? You're trying to replace my currency with yours.
Mm-hmm.
But if you say, hey, I'm just oil, I'm just gold. I'm just a commodity. Leave me be, right? Then they'll leave you be. And that is true. And it will be why Bitcoin, which is rare and is special, will become ever more rare, as we both know, ever more valuable over time. It'll be financed just like gold is, right? Gold is, it's not like super financeable, but it's financeable. Oil, it's not super financeable, but it's financeable, right? Bitcoin will be financeable. Bitcoin will be way, way, way higher, sometimes lower. You just have to have faith.
I mean, you can see right here, you even have billionaire Ray Dalio saying, I want to steer away from debt assets and have some hard money like gold and Bitcoin. And keep in mind, this guy used to be a Bitcoin skeptic, but, you know, come to think of it, wasn't everyone a Bitcoin skeptic at some point, right? I mean, I even, you know, faded Bitcoin when I was in college. My friend, I haven't spoken to him in a long time. I hope he kept his Bitcoin. He was mining Bitcoin on his laptop, or his PC at the time. But yeah, it was like a PC rig, whatever. But point is, he was telling me about it. It was like a couple dollars or something like that. And I didn't listen to him. I didn't care. You know, I was too busy partying and doing all this other stuff, silly internet money. And, I came around to it. Most people come around to it. Eric Trump, for example, he says, feels like a great time to enter Bitcoin. So you're just starting to see it as more of a narrative, more of a talking point. And, it's not going to be perfect. It's not going to be a perfect straight shot to the moon. There's going to be falls, right? You're going to take 3 steps forward and then 2 steps back. South Dakota legislator, they're convinced that they're going to be the first state in the nation to pass the Bitcoin Reserve bill. There's a lot of states that are, submitting these bills, but it's not all sunshine and rainbows, because unfortunately 2 state level Bitcoin reserves have failed, right? Wyoming's HB 201 died at the committee, and North Dakota's HB 1184 failed a House vote, right? So this doesn't mean it's the end of the world. It doesn't mean it's totally failed. Do you know how many times a Bitcoin ETF got rejected? I mean, Gemini was trying to get one. Don't quote me, but they did something between 2010 and 2013, I don't know. They were trying to basically get this thing passed for like 10 years, and it just kept getting slammed down, and finally BlackRock stepped in and they were able to get it approved, right? So just because a bill doesn't pass, or it dies, or it doesn't pass the Senate or whatever, the House, it's fine, okay? The fact that it's even being brought up, the fact that it's even being discussed, right, is a win. Now, again, I don't think Bitcoin needs politics. I don't think Bitcoin needs banks or anything like that, right? It survived this long without it. But let's be honest, the majority of the world, a lot of these older, investors, family offices, some of these funds, these hedge funds, to this day, there's still some that are skeptical. I saw something that came out, was it from Goldman Sachs, that said 70% of institutions are still skeptical and are not sure if they're going to invest yet, right? But it's one of those slowly and then suddenly things, right? Everybody wants these things to happen overnight. But like Michael Saylor says, as far as the U.S. Bitcoin Strategic Reserve is, they get it. They understand it. We will see the U.S. move very, very aggressively eventually.
Do you see a day where Donald Trump has a U.S. reserve in Bitcoin?
I do, actually. I think that Bitcoin is emerging as the world's reserve capital network. It is the dominant capital network of the world. So the dollar is the world's reserve currency. And you recall, I said money is currency if it's short-term medium exchange. It's capital if it's long-term store of value. And if I wanted to send $1 billion from one point on the earth to the other, right? The choice is ship $1 billion of gold, move $1 billion building, or send Bitcoin, or send $1 billion of paintings. You can see paintings aren't fungible. They don't make good money. A building isn't portable. It doesn't make good money. Gold, gold failed as a capital network 400 years ago when the King of Spain tried to send a bunch of gold to the Netherlands to finance his army. It got blocked by Queen Elizabeth. She bankrupted the Spanish army, and that's why the Netherlands is Protestant and not Catholic today. So it's pretty obvious. Bitcoin is a great capital network, and it's a great capital asset. It makes sense for the U.S. to own it. Because if the US owns that capital network, then anybody that wants to sell their Russian real estate or their Chinese natural gas fields is going to buy Bitcoin. So if you know where everybody's going, if you know everybody in the rest of the world is going to Bitcoin, and if you know everybody in the 20th century is going to trade their 20th century assets for 21st century assets, you might as well buy a big chunk of the network so that when they get there, you're the beneficiary of it. And I think Trump is a pretty good business person, and this is an economic brilliant stroke. So I think that they get it, they understand it, and we will see the U.S. Move very, very aggressively into Bitcoin at some point in time.
And personally, if I was you guys, dealing with the fact that we are going sideways, who knows? Maybe we close the CME futures gap. Maybe we go down to 78,000 again. But, I consider these dips to be for buying, right? Just like you had actually seen in the previous interview with Anthony Pompliano, these dips are for buying. I know that sounds crazy, but you don't get these types of opportunities forever. And if you look historically, Bitcoin is very boring for a long time, right? What did we do? What did we do all last summer? Sideways, bouncing between like 58 and 72, right? That's all we did for the 8 months of the year. You know how bored people got? People walked away, they didn't accumulate, and then boom, straight to 100 like that overnight. I mean, it was literally within like a week, right? The same thing is going to happen again. We're going to be bouncing around. Maybe we have a fake out to the downside. Next thing you know, you're going to wake up 150, 160, 180. Geez, why didn't I buy? So the time to really be paying attention isn't when everyone's excited. It's really kind of now when sentiment is horrible. People are getting wrecked in the altcoins. There's so much fundamentals in the background, and yet no one's talking about it, right? That is when the smart investors make the most money. And speaking of getting back, I don't want to get too off topic, but Trump's crypto czar just said the first thing we're going to look at is a strategic Bitcoin reserve.
So one of the things that the president instructed us to do was to evaluate the idea for a Bitcoin reserve, and so that is one of the things. That's one of the first things we're going to look at as part of the internal working group in the administration. So as soon as we get all that set up, we're still waiting for some cabinet secretaries who are on the working group to get confirmed. So we're still in the very early stages of this. But that's one of the first things we're gonna look at is the feasibility of a Bitcoin reserve. I think the concept of the sovereign wealth fund is a little separate, and you'd have to talk to Secretary Lutnick, or soon to be Secretary Lutnick, about that.
The first thing. He also agrees that it's a great store of value.
David, recast for us, if you will, the value of Bitcoin specifically, cryptocurrency and blockchain technology in general. As we're now in the Trump administration era, we're in the back half of the 2020s. Back 5 years ago plus, there was talks about using it as a means of buying things. Now it's more about the store of value and the way perhaps hedge against inflation in various currencies. What do you see as the real value and the reason why the United States government should be paying so much attention to it?
Well, I think there's a few different aspects here when you're talking about digital aspects. So first of all, you got Bitcoin. It was the first digital currency, and it's the original. It's the strongest one. In the parlance of the industry, it's the most Lindy, meaning it's been around for over a dozen years now. No one's ever hacked it. No one's ever cracked the security around it. And so it is an excellent store of value. So that would be point number one. Bitcoin is run on, as you know, a blockchain. It's basically a distributed ledger, which is essentially a form of decentralized computing. And that platform can be used to create a lot of other types of products. And so that would be sort of technology area number two, is all the innovation that can be built on top of blockchains. And
by the way, for those not familiar with the Lindy Effect, I'm going to simplify it for you. Forget the crazy definition. Lindy Effect, in a nutshell, is basically if something has existed for a certain amount of time, there is an extremely high likelihood that it will exist for the same amount of time again, okay? Like, in other words, if the automobile has been successfully implemented and people have been using it for 10 years, then the likelihood that they'll use it for another 10 years, right, is a very high chance probability. Now, I'm oversimplifying it, but basically it says if Bitcoin's been around for 16 years, then the likelihood that it'll be around for another 16 years and the likelihood that it will continue to appreciate at the percentage that it has is very likely. I mean, this is a really blurry. I couldn't find a better chart than this online. I used to have this downloaded, but basically you have digital collectibles for nerds, speculation, greater perceived safety, greater liquidity, reliable store of value, widespread medium exchange, all the way up to potential full global money, right? And this is essentially that sort of Lindy chart, right? Where it just continues to grow, it continues to gain that adoption, etc. And another thing, this was an interesting article, just headline from Bloomberg: parents ditch 529 plans and embrace Bitcoin for college savings. So you're actually starting to see some parents, maybe they're the millennials now, that have kids that maybe might be going off to college. I don't know how young they had their children, but they're actually starting to say to themselves, these traditional means versus Bitcoin, why don't we just start saving in Bitcoin for our college funds and for our future, since it's been such an amazing store of value. And again, getting back to this, getting a little off topic here, but getting back to David Sachs, as far as the crypto industry seeing regulations and all these other things, again, they take time. There's a lot of process that goes through it. But considering that we had an entire 4-year presidency, 4 years of nothing but just trying to crush the digital asset industry, and now they're saying we could see clear regulations within 6 months.
You did talk about the need for this clear regulatory framework. How quickly can you stand this up?
Well, I was on the Hill today meeting with the leaders of our House and Senate committees for banking and for finance, and they are very committed to moving legislation through the House and the Senate this year in order to provide that clear regulatory framework that the digital assets ecosystem needs to sustain innovation in the United States. And so those chairmen, I think, are very committed. President Trump is committed, and I think we can do something here. But as you know, moving legislation through Congress takes time. But I think this is something we could do in the next 6 months.
And I know the focus has been extremely primarily on the US, but like British Hodl points out, Europe is about to be force-fed Bitcoin. BlackRock just announced they will be launching exchange-traded Bitcoin products in Europe. Thank God, because EU bureaucrats will never get smart, right? And, ARK, they still have their targets for Bitcoin on pace for 2030. So, can you wait 6 years? Is 6 years too much to wait? I mean, I don't know how old my audience is. I don't know how old, maybe if you're 70 years or older, I mean, as long as you take care of yourself, I would think 6 years wouldn't be that much. But I think the majority of the people who watch this channel are, older Gen Zs, maybe X's to, Millennial X. I don't know if any boomers watch this channel, I'm not sure. But 6 years to have a $1.5 million Bitcoin, I mean, 300,000 by 2030 is the bear case. I mean, I think Bitcoin could 3x in 6 years. That doesn't seem like that crazy of a target, right? Mid case 710 and ultimate case 1.5 million. So people talking about Bitcoin not being life-changing money, if your dollar, and keep in mind, I know it's 100, it was $15,000 at the low. And we were in the bear market making these videos. You could definitely scrape together. You can scrape together $15,000. You could do it. You know my story. I mean, I sold everything. I sold my cars. I don't do what I did, but I stopped paying my mortgage and I started throwing everything into Bitcoin, right? And if you think about a $1.5 million, I mean, that might not be ultimate luxury jet setter traveling around the world kind of money, but $1.5 million could definitely change a person's life. You could pay your mortgage off, you could pay your cars off, right? And all you got to worry about is what? Your property tax and your insurance. I mean, I'm sure you can take, what I mean? So it is life-changing. And the thought of just, one Bitcoin won't change my life, that's not a good way to think. It's not a good way to think. And history has proven otherwise, And, not to mention that, Bitcoin is hands down better than gold. And I think with this digital world, that's the direction that we're moving in.
Bitcoin, hands down. Hands down. Bitcoin is a hedge against both inflation and deflation. Yes, so is gold, but Bitcoin is digital. And if you look at the incremental demand, we're going to see, but gold already has its demand, it's happened, right? Bitcoin is new and institutions are barely involved. And young people would much prefer to hold Bitcoin than to hold gold. So, it's interesting that both gold and Bitcoin are hedges against deflation, but Bitcoin's been doing better recently.
In fact, Michael Saylor even says that he thinks that we should just sell all our gold and just buy Bitcoin anyway.
I don't know what the purpose of a Bitcoin central reserve is, and I haven't seen the details of why that's important.
Bitcoin is emerging as the world's reserve capital network. People are realizing that Bitcoin is better than real estate. It's better than stocks. There's not a single company or real estate property that you would rather own for the long term than Bitcoin. So the very simple idea is buy 20 or 25% of the Bitcoin network on behalf of the U.S. government, catalyze the development of that world reserve capital network, and then let all the Chinese and the Russians and the foreigners sell all their other assets and buy Bitcoin, and then the money flows into the United States. If you want to put a great twist on it, dump your gold, sell all the U.S. gold, buy Bitcoin, then the trade is free because you could buy 5 million Bitcoin for the cost of the gold. You will demonetize the entire gold asset class, and our enemies hold gold in their banks, so their assets would go to zero. Our assets would go to $100 trillion, and we would control the world's reserve capital network as well as the world's reserve currency network.
Totally random side note. I didn't know where to insert this in the video, but apparently Elon Musk has confirmed he wants to put the U.S. Treasury on the blockchain so that the people will be able to see where the government is spending taxpayer dollars. I don't know about you, but as a tax-paying citizen, I think that'd be a phenomenal idea. In fact, I think voting should be on the blockchain. Honestly, I mean, then we wouldn't have. How would we be able to cheat if everyone had a unique, I don't know, wallet, or you could even give each person like an NFT, right, that represented you as an individual, and you could vote, right? There's so many ways around this corruption. So yeah, I'm totally down with being able to do that. But, getting back to the fun stuff, I just want to insert that, Dr. Jeff Ross predicts that possibly by Q4 of 2025, you could see nation state FOMO, and you could even see Bitcoin hit something like 475,000. Now, that's a little high for me for this cycle. I've gone over my targets, but again, I was the person who very bullish on Bitcoin, definitely think we're hitting 1 million, but last year, I was even skeptical about $100,000 Bitcoin. So you never really know.
It's inevitable that Bitcoin will eventually become the world's reserve currency and the world's reserve asset. We're on that trajectory. People hate the term inevitable because they think that implies no human effort. I think there's going to be tons of human effort from Bitcoiners who understand Bitcoin. And because of that effort, Bitcoin will become inevitably the world's reserve asset and the world's reserve currency in time, in decades.
I completely agree with that. And I think that hands are going to be forced as well. Like I'm fairly confident from people I've spoken to that the UAE hold a significant amount of Bitcoin, whether that's 200, 300, 400,000 coins, whatever. That's going to play into it. And I think that may end up forcing the US's hand in some way, maybe quite quickly. But in terms of like this Bitcoin cycle, how important do you think the US involvement is?
I think it's just basically I think it's important for this cycle, as you say. I think it's going to be the main driver that will push us to the next level. So I'm still holding on to my thesis or my guess of Bitcoin at a price target of about 475,000 by the fourth quarter of 2025. And that's because of now mild nation state involvement. So the U.S. will probably get involved to some degree. That should start a bit of a foot race for Bitcoin, but I don't think it will be as impressive as a lot of people think. We had MicroStrategy last cycle. Now we have a handful of companies doing the Bitcoin treasury strategy. It's great to see, but it's still just a teeny tiny drop in the bucket so far. But that's enough, I think, enough interest to help push the price higher in this next cycle. So once we see liquidity really start to take off, I think that's what will propel Bitcoin to, a 500K valuation, maybe a million, who knows? My range is anywhere from 200,000 to 1 million at some point. And then I think people will get over leveraged again, like people always do, because they get caught up in the hype and they do stupid things. And then we have another crash after that. And then the next cycle, I think, will be more of nation state involvement kind of early on. And we'll start seeing nation states stacking at a more significant level.
Also, I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with Lynn Alden. She's a great author. She's written a lot of books on Bitcoin. And, I've always enjoyed her content and her perspective. And even she explains why, you know, and she's pretty level-headed, right? She doesn't like take either side either way, like and I like these like kind of level-headed approaches. This is why she's bullish.
Lynn, you lay out 3 reasons that people should be considering investing in Bitcoin this year. Break them down for us.
So one of them is the fact that Bitcoin's network effect remains very strong. So when you look at Bitcoin dominance, the percentage of the total cryptocurrency ecosystem that the Bitcoin represents, that's been on the rise lately. It's very strong. There's millions of cryptocurrencies now, and Bitcoin is well over half of the entire space, especially when you strip out stable coins, which are basically just dollars trading on crypto rails. So Bitcoin dominance is looking very healthy. When you look at various kind of on-chain indicators of euphoria, so for example, market value versus on-chain cost basis in aggregate, it doesn't look like prior cycle tops yet. It doesn't mean that market structure might not change or cycles might not change, but in general, we don't see some of the warning signs that we normally see at major cycle tops like 2021, 2017, and that type of thing. And then also, we're finally seeing a lot more interest from corporations. So in the prior cycle, MicroStrategy was the main corporation that added Bitcoin to its treasury as a treasury reserve asset. And we didn't really see a lot of movement after that, despite the fact that MicroStrategy was advocating for it and holding conferences for it. But as you've seen better accounting, and as you've seen a full cycle of strong performance from MicroStrategy, this seems to be the cycle where actually we are getting more and more corporate announcements. And so I expect that trend to probably continue for a while longer. I think all these trends are pretty bullish for Bitcoin specifically within the digital asset ecosystem.
And I really like this post that came out from Stack Hodler. It kind of breaks down the sort of psychology of these Bitcoin dips or prices, whatever. So it's early 2017. You're up massively after loading up on Bitcoin in the 200s in 2015, okay? But now Bitcoin is crashing after setting new highs above the 2013 high. Is the bull market over? Should you sell now? Well, obviously in hindsight, you shouldn't have sold at 200, but check this out. So this right here, once you pull it up on the log, boom. Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Let's zoom out some more. Absolutely not. And every time, this looks like the end of the world. This looks like the end of the world. And we'll probably come down again at some point, and that'll be the end of the world. And then eventually this is going to end up looking like this, which is going to end up looking like this. And I'm not saying that it has to happen that way forever, but that's how it's happened. So the Lindy Effect, right? If something has happened this way for a very long time, then it's probably going to continue to happen that way, right? Of course, until it doesn't. But the likelihood is that it will. So let's have a super quick look. Not much has changed again on the TA, but you know, for the most part, look, guys, we are still bouncing between these two areas. We have the 0.786 and we have the 1 right here. So it's basically just bouncing between this $90,000 area and this $104,000 area. We are just consolidating right now. There's nothing to actually be alarmed about. This is still a constructive pattern. Now, okay, you could argue, I mean, so I'm gonna see something like this, right? All right, and they're gonna go, oh, well, we lost this right here. We lost this. But that happens all the time. You lose uptrends all the time. Here's another example, right? Imagine this right here, right? And then what happened? Somebody was like, oh, we lost the uptrend. That's it. No, it's not. Then it just goes into consolidation. So if it came down, we would probably most likely just continue to consolidate. You know, again, yeah, we are sitting at that level, but this is exactly what I'm talking about. So here's the line right here. Say we break this and we come down, right? Then you're going to hear people saying, see, it's over. We broke the line. But it happens, right? You also get parabolas that eventually break over time as well. But you're looking for these constructive patterns. Longer term, the trajectory is up. See this massive consolidation phase that we had back here, right? This massive consolidation phase. Who's to say that we're not doing that again right here, right? Same thing like we did right here, okay? These are consolidations. Here's a little consolidation right here, okay? This just happens, and eventually sometimes you do break to the downside, but ultimately the trajectory is up. You can actually see so far that we've held the downward sloping resistance as now current support, right? And again, the only outlier that I can say, the only thing I could say on this channel about possible bearishness, it's very loud right now, there's a plane going overhead. is this CME futures gap down here. And to close that gap, we would have to come down to about $77,000, 78, whatever. Could it happen? Yes. But again, that would be the buy the dip opportunity for me, because ultimately, you know, the super guppy, the long-term EMAs were way, way, way above it. We're not even testing into the green. We're still in the teal. So ultimately, that's where I'm leaving it, because I can't keep talking about the same TA every day. It is a constructive pattern. There are no top signals in. Fundamentally, everything is great. For Bitcoin, I can't speak for all the altcoins, specifically the meme coins, which have no utility, and they're just communities, and you have to understand that they're gambles. You know, they're all just the flavor of the week, right? Moodang, right? He was a big meme, the little hippo guy. Who's talking about that anymore? Chill guy, right? That was a meme for like a month. Who's talking about that anymore, right? These meme coins, if you're going to play them, you got to get in and you got to get out, but you have to understand that, I mean, even Doge is still not really performing, you know, compared to Bitcoin, and that's supposedly the leader of them all. So that's where I'm going to leave it today. Hopefully you guys understand a nice broader perspective of what's going on. Yeah, so I don't know if I'm going to get any updates out to you this weekend. I'm a little bit busy. If I see anything worth talking about, you can follow me over on X. It's at the Crypto Zombie. Like I said, I haven't been on there as much. I post once in a while. It's been a little depressing over there. So come on over here to YouTube. Get subscribed if you have not. Also, drop a like on the video. Just so you guys know, my last video, I was watching it and I wasn't getting a lot of views, and I realized that I ended up getting a copyright claim because I used a song in the video, and that basically just kills your views. So in the event that the video doesn't pop up, I highly suggest that you just turn on the bell notifications below. That way when I put a video out, you will definitely see it, because sometimes people tell me like, oh, I've even had my dad reach out and be like, oh, I didn't see you put a video out. And I'm like, no, I put a video out. Like, you know, sometimes it just doesn't show up in the feed. So put the notifications on, get subscribed so you see it in the feed, and then you'll never miss a video again. And of course, if you guys do want to trade, you know, I do recommend Femex is an amazing exchange. They have, you know, non-KYC, like I said, $50,000 a day withdrawals. Check out these tutorials, by the way, if you want to trade. And Blowfin, really awesome new exchange, really super sleek and easy to use. This is one that I use pretty much on a daily basis. So if you guys want, there's like $45,000 worth of bonuses. There's like 70,000 below. So until next time, guys, that's it. Stay crypto, and of course, peace out.